Here's a question that surprises many people who care about health, energy, aging, and long-term vitality. What if a simple 1-minute engagement with your own body could help restore a key aspect of metabolic and hormonal balance, including potency, without pills, gimmicks, or expensive therapies? Most of us have been taught to treat symptoms, low energy, low libido, poor recovery, as isolated issues. We reach for caffeine to fight fatigue. We assume age automatically erodes hormone levels. We look for quick fixes that mask underlying change instead of addressing why the change happened in the first place. But what the research shows is that many of these symptoms, low energy, low testosterone, reduced sexual function, poor metabolic health, share common root causes in how your nervous system, endocrine system, and metabolic systems interact. These systems weren't designed to be fragmented. They evolved to be deeply interconnected. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Your nervous system and vascular system are constantly communicating. Your endocrine system, your hormones, responds to that ongoing dialogue. When your internal stress signals are high, for example, chronically elevated cortisol from poor sleep, excessive sugar intake, or continual sympathetic fight or flight activation, your body downregulates anabolic processes like growth, repair, and hormone production. Potency, and more broadly, metabolic and hormonal health, isn't just about sexual function. It's about energy production, cardiovascular tone, blood flow, insulin regulation, liver function, and hormone synthesis. These systems operate together, so the question isn't, how do I fix low libido? The real question is, how do I restore the foundational physiological conditions that support robust metabolism, stable hormones, and efficient repair? And this leads to a surprising insight. There's a small, often overlooked connection point in your body, a physiological spot, that plays a significant role in nervous system balance, blood flow regulation, and hormonal signaling. Engaging with it for just 1 minute, in the right context, can shift your internal environment from stress-dominant to repair-dominant. Today, we're not talking about quick fixes or fantasy solutions. We're talking about root cause interventions supported by biology and physiology. Interventions you can practice with your own body without drugs, without invasive procedures, and without guesswork. Over the course of this video, you'll learn the science behind metabolic and hormonal control, why potency is tied to more than just sex hormones, how nervous system balance affects blood flow and repair, a practical 1-minute protocol grounded in physiology, the role of timing, breathing, and circulation in restoring function, how to integrate this into a daily routine for lasting change. If this is helpful so far, consider subscribing. I post content like this every day to help you build resilient, adaptable health without medication. Let's begin with the first principle, and it may challenge what you've been told for years. Potency is primarily a blood flow and nervous system event. Testosterone plays a role, yes, but without proper vascular function and parasympathetic activation, hormone levels alone cannot create a physiological response. Here's what's really going on inside your body. An erection is fundamentally a hydraulic event. Blood must flow efficiently into specialized vascular tissue and remain there long enough to create firmness. That requires 3 things: healthy arteries, adequate nitric oxide production, and a nervous system that signals safety, not stress. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine your vascular system as a network of expandable garden hoses. Nitric oxide acts like the signal that tells those hoses to widen. When nitric oxide is released from the endothelium, the inner lining of your blood vessels, the vessels dilate, pressure changes, and blood flows in. But here's the key. Nitric oxide release is strongly influenced by your autonomic nervous system. If your body is in sympathetic mode, fight or flight, blood is shunted away from reproductive organs and towards skeletal muscle and the heart. Survival always takes priority over reproduction. And modern life keeps most people in low-grade sympathetic dominance all day long. Emails, financial stress, poor sleep, excess sugar, chronic inflammation. Research in vascular physiology shows that endothelial dysfunction, The inability of blood vessels to properly dilate is one of the earliest predictors of cardiovascular disease. Interestingly, erectile dysfunction often precedes heart disease by several years. Why? Because the penile arteries are smaller and show dysfunction sooner. So when potency declines, it is often an early vascular signal, not just a hormonal one. Now this is where the 1-minute spot becomes relevant. There is a region near the ear and jawline where the vagus nerve has superficial branches. Gentle stimulation in this area, especially when paired with slow diaphragmatic breathing, can increase vagal tone. Increased vagal tone shifts the body into parasympathetic dominance. Parasympathetic dominance is the state of repair, digestion, hormone production, and sexual function. When vagal tone improves, heart rate variability improves. Cortisol begins to fall. Nitric oxide signaling improves. Blood vessels become more responsive. This is not theory. Studies on vagus nerve stimulation, both clinical and non-invasive, show improvements in autonomic balance, inflammatory markers, and vascular function. Now, I want to be clear, this is not magic, it's physiology. When you apply gentle pressure just below the ear, near the angle of the jaw, and combine it with slow nasal breathing, 5 seconds in, 7 seconds out, for 1 minute, you are signaling to your brainstem that the environment is safe. Safety permits blood flow. Safety permits hormone signaling. Safety permits repair. And if this explanation is helping you see your body differently, consider subscribing. I share evidence-based tools like this daily to help you optimize naturally. But here's the critical point. If your insulin is chronically elevated, if your liver is inflamed, if your sleep is fragmented, no amount of stimulation will override metabolic dysfunction. The 1-minute activation works best when it's layered onto a body that isn't constantly fighting metabolic chaos. So think of this first technique as flipping the master switch from stress to repair. It doesn't replace foundational health, it amplifies it. Good. Now we move deeper, because if blood flow is the mechanical side of potency, stress biology is the biochemical brake. Chronic stress is one of the most underestimated suppressors of sexual function, not because stress is dramatic, but because it's constant. Here's what's really going on inside your body. When your brain perceives stress, whether it's psychological, inflammatory, financial, or metabolic, the hypothalamus activates the HPA axis. The hypothalamus signals the pituitary. The pituitary signals the adrenal glands. And cortisol rises. Cortisol is not the enemy. It's essential for survival. It mobilizes glucose. It increases alertness. It keeps you alive under threat. But here's the trade-off. Cortisol suppresses reproduction. From an evolutionary standpoint, this makes perfect sense. If the environment is unsafe, reproduction is not a priority. So the body diverts energy away from testosterone production and toward immediate survival. Now let's connect this to potency. Elevated cortisol does 3 important things. First, it interferes with testosterone synthesis. High cortisol competes with testosterone at the receptor level and reduces gonadotropin-releasing hormone signaling from the brain. Second, it increases insulin resistance. When cortisol remains elevated, blood sugar rises. Insulin rises to compensate. Over time, endothelial function declines, nitric oxide production decreases, and vascular responsiveness weakens. Third, it increases systemic inflammation, and inflammation impairs the endothelium, the inner lining of your arteries that must function properly for dilation. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Think of testosterone as construction workers rebuilding and maintaining infrastructure. Cortisol is the emergency response team. When emergency response is always active, construction is paused, repair is paused, expansion is paused. If your nervous system never exits emergency mode, potency becomes biologically deprioritized. Now here's where the 1-minute activation protocol becomes strategic. Stimulating the vagal region near the jawline while breathing slowly increases parasympathetic tone. Parasympathetic activation suppresses excessive HPA axis signaling. Over time, this reduces baseline cortisol output. But I want you to understand something critical. This technique works best when layered into a broader anti-cortisol framework. Here is a practical protocol you can begin implementing immediately. Morning light exposure within 10 minutes of waking. Natural light anchors circadian rhythm and lowers evening cortisol. Protein-forward first meal. Aim for 30-40 grams of protein to stabilize blood sugar and prevent cortisol spikes. Eliminate late-night refined carbohydrates. Evening glucose spikes fragment sleep and elevate nighttime cortisol. Magnesium glycinate, 200-400 mg in the evening if tolerated. Magnesium supports parasympathetic tone and improves sleep quality. 1-minute vagal activation twice daily. Once mid-afternoon when stress accumulates, and once before bed. Slow inhale through the nose for 5 seconds. Slow exhale for 7 seconds. Gentle pressure below the ear near the angle of the jaw. Keep shoulders relaxed. This combination lowers sympathetic dominance and improves heart rate variability, a key biomarker of autonomic balance. If this deeper physiological breakdown is helpful so far, consider subscribing. Most people chase quick fixes. We focus on root causes. Now here's the important transition. Even if you control stress and support vagal tone, potency can still decline if metabolic health is impaired. And the organ at the center of that metabolic control is one most people never think about in this context: the liver. Now we arrive at a root cause almost no one discusses in conversations about potency, metabolic dysfunction, specifically insulin resistance and liver congestion. If stress is the neurological brake, metabolic dysfunction is the biochemical drag. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Every time you eat refined carbohydrates or frequently snack throughout the day, insulin rises. Insulin's job is to move glucose into cells. In the short term, that's normal. But when insulin remains elevated for years, cells become less responsive. This is insulin resistance. Now here's where it becomes relevant to potency. Insulin resistance reduces nitric oxide production. The endothelium, the lining of your blood vessels, relies on proper insulin signaling to produce nitric oxide via endothelial nitric oxide synthase, ENOS. When insulin signaling becomes dysfunctional, nitric oxide output declines. Blood vessels become less responsive. Dilation weakens. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine nitric oxide as the text message telling your blood vessels to relax and open. Insulin resistance is like a weak cell signal. The message doesn't go through clearly. The vessel doesn't fully open. Less dilation means reduced blood flow, but that's only part of the story. The liver plays a central role in hormone metabolism. It regulates sex hormone-binding globulin, SHBG, converts hormones into active or inactive forms, and processes inflammatory byproducts. When the liver becomes fatty, a condition now affecting a large percentage of adults due to excess sugar and processed foods, several things happen. Inflammation increases, SHBG levels shift, free testosterone availability changes, estrogen clearance slows, and here's the critical insight. You can have normal total testosterone on a lab test, yet still have low bioavailable testosterone due to elevated SHBG or impaired liver conversion. So potency isn't just about producing testosterone. It's about activating and delivering it properly in a metabolically healthy environment. Research in metabolic medicine consistently shows a strong association between insulin resistance and erectile dysfunction, even independent of age. In fact, erectile dysfunction is often an early vascular symptom of metabolic syndrome, which brings us back to the 1-minute activation spot. When you stimulate vagal tone and lower sympathetic dominance, you improve insulin sensitivity indirectly. Parasympathetic activity enhances pancreatic function and glucose regulation. Over time, this supports endothelial repair, but this works best when paired with foundational metabolic interventions. Here is a simple metabolic restoration protocol. First, compress your eating window. Aim for 12 to 14 hours overnight without calories. This lowers fasting insulin and allows nitric oxide pathways to recover. Second, prioritize resistance training 3 to 4 times per week. Skeletal muscle is the largest glucose sink in the body. The more metabolically active muscle you have, the lower your baseline insulin. Third, increase dietary nitrate sources. Arugula, spinach, beets. These naturally enhance nitric oxide availability through the nitrate-nitrite pathway. Fourth, reduce fructose-heavy processed foods. Excess fructose burdens the liver directly and promotes fatty liver accumulation. Fifth, ensure adequate zinc and vitamin D. Zinc supports testosterone synthesis. Vitamin D acts more like a hormone than a vitamin and correlates with testosterone levels in multiple studies. Now pause and think about this connection. Better insulin sensitivity, better liver function, better nitric oxide signaling, better vascular responsiveness. Potency becomes the downstream result. And if this root cause approach resonates with you, consider subscribing. We're not chasing symptoms here. We're building physiology. Now let's go directly to the control center, the vagus nerve. If insulin resistance is the biochemical drag and cortisol is the stress brake, the vagus nerve is the master regulator that decides which system dominates. Here's what's really going on inside your body. The vagus nerve is the primary parasympathetic nerve. It originates in the brainstem and travels down through the neck into the heart, lungs, digestive system, and even influences inflammatory signaling. It is not a relaxation trick. It is a biological command line. When vagal tone is high, your body shifts into repair mode. Heart rate slows efficiently. Blood pressure stabilizes. Digestion improves. Inflammation decreases. Nitric oxide signaling improves. When vagal tone is low, sympathetic tone dominates. Cortisol rises. Blood vessels constrict. Testosterone signaling weakens. Recovery slows. Potency requires parasympathetic activation. In fact, physiologically speaking, erection is parasympathetic driven, while ejaculation is sympathetic driven. That distinction alone tells you how important nervous system balance is. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Think of your autonomic nervous system as a seesaw. On one side is sympathetic activation, stress, urgency, mobilization. On the other side is parasympathetic activation, safety, repair, regeneration. Most modern adults are permanently tilted towards sympathetic dominance. Late-night screen exposure, high-sugar diets, fragmented sleep, constant digital stimulation, the seesaw rarely rebalances. Now here's where the 1-minute spot becomes precise. Just below the ear, near the angle of the jaw, lies an accessible region influenced by branches of the vagus nerve and surrounding parasympathetic fibers. Gentle stimulation here, combined with slow exhalation-focused breathing, can increase vagal output. But technique matters. Here is the optimized 1-minute vagal activation protocol. Sit upright, shoulders relaxed, place 2 fingers just below the ear at the angle of the jaw. Apply gentle circular pressure, not painful, just firm enough to feel contact. Inhale through the nose for 5 seconds. Exhale slowly through the nose for 7 to 8 seconds. Emphasize the exhale. The long exhale stimulates vagal output more strongly than the inhale. Do this for 1 minute per side. Why the exhale? Because the vagus nerve slows the heart primarily during exhalation. Longer exhales increase heart rate variability, one of the best markers of vagal tone. Higher heart rate variability correlates with better stress resilience, better glucose regulation, lower inflammation, improved endothelial function. And this is not theoretical. Non-invasive vagus nerve stimulation has been studied for depression, epilepsy, inflammation, and cardiovascular regulation. What we're doing here is a gentle, natural version that leverages the same physiology. Now, let's connect the dots clearly. When vagal tone increases, cortisol decreases, insulin sensitivity improves, nitric oxide production increases, blood vessels respond better. Testosterone signaling operates in a safer biological environment. Potency improves as a downstream effect. But here is the key insight most people miss. You cannot stimulate your way out of chronic sleep deprivation. You cannot outbreathe severe insulin resistance. You cannot pressure point your way past systemic inflammation. This 1-minute practice is a lever, but levers work best when the machinery is maintained. Now we move from mechanism to integration, because isolated techniques create temporary shifts, but layered physiology creates lasting change. If you truly want to restore potency, energy, and metabolic resilience, you must think in terms of cumulative inputs. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Every day, your biology is running an equation. Sleep quality, light exposure, micronutrient status, inflammatory load, insulin levels, nervous system balance. These variables determine whether your body prioritizes repair or defense. The 1-minute vagal activation works, but its power multiplies when integrated into a daily framework that supports nitric oxide production, testosterone signaling, and endothelial integrity. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine trying to inflate a balloon with a small hand pump. The pump works, but if the balloon has tiny leaks, you'll never build pressure. Sleep deprivation, micronutrient deficiencies, alcohol excess, and chronic hyperinsulinemia are those leaks. So let's seal them. First, sleep is non-negotiable. Testosterone production peaks during deep sleep, particularly during the first few REM cycles. Studies consistently show that even 1 week of restricted sleep can significantly reduce daytime testosterone levels in healthy men. Your protocol: target 7 to 8 hours nightly. Eliminate screens 60 minutes before bed. Keep the room cool and completely dark. Use the 1-minute vagal activation before sleep to shift into parasympathetic dominance. Second, nitric oxide support through food. Nitric oxide declines with age, but dietary nitrates can restore part of this pathway. Add daily: arugula, spinach, beets, pomegranate. These compounds convert to nitric oxide through the nitrate-nitrite pathway, independent of the insulin pathway we discussed earlier. Third, micronutrient sufficiency. Zinc supports Leydig cell function in the testes. Magnesium improves insulin sensitivity and lowers sympathetic tone. Vitamin D acts as a steroid hormone regulator and correlates with testosterone levels in multiple clinical studies. Test, don't guess, but ensure sufficiency. Fourth, resistance training. Resistance training increases androgen receptor density and improves insulin sensitivity simultaneously. It is one of the most potent natural interventions for improving metabolic and hormonal health. 3 to 4 sessions per week. Focus on compound movements, progressive overload, short rest intervals to stimulate vascular adaptation. Fifth, alcohol moderation. Alcohol impairs liver function, increases estrogen conversion, and reduces sleep quality. Even moderate nightly drinking can blunt testosterone production and disrupt nitric oxide pathways. Now let's bring it all together. Morning, light exposure, plus protein-rich meal. Midday, resistance training or walking, stable blood sugar. Afternoon, 1-minute vagal activation when stress rises. Evening, lower carbohydrates, magnesium if needed, vagal activation before bed. When you repeat this daily, you are not boosting potency. You are restoring biological conditions that make potency inevitable. And if this layered, science-driven approach is helping you rethink your health strategy, consider subscribing. I share tools like this regularly to help you optimize naturally without dependence on medication. Now let's bring this together clearly and practically. Because if you strip away the marketing, the myths, and the symptom chasing, what we discussed today is not really about potency. It's about biological prioritization. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Your system is constantly asking one question: is it safe to repair, reproduce, and regenerate? Or do I need to defend and survive? When stress dominates, cortisol rises. When insulin stays elevated, nitric oxide falls. When the liver is congested, hormone signaling weakens. When sleep fragments, testosterone production drops. Potency is simply one of the first systems to go offline when the body senses instability, and that's not dysfunction. That's intelligent design. Let's recap the key insights. First, potency is primarily a vascular and nervous system event. Without nitric oxide and parasympathetic activation, testosterone alone cannot drive function. Second, chronic stress suppresses reproductive signaling. Cortisol competes with and overrides anabolic hormones. Third, Insulin resistance and liver health directly affect endothelial function and bioavailable testosterone. Fourth, the vagus nerve acts as a master switch. Increasing vagal tone shifts your body from sympathetic dominance into repair mode. Fifth, the 1-minute activation protocol, gentle pressure below the ear at the jaw angle combined with slow extended exhalation breathing, increases parasympathetic output and supports vascular responsiveness. Sixth, this works best when layered onto foundational habits, sleep optimization, resistance training, nitric oxide-rich foods, micronutrient sufficiency, and stable blood sugar. Let me explain this with one final analogy. Imagine trying to grow a garden. You don't yell at the plants to grow faster. You don't tape leaves onto the stems. You improve the soil. You regulate sunlight. You control water. And growth becomes the natural outcome. Your body works the same way. You don't force potency. You restore the terrain. So here's your challenge. For the next 14 days, perform the 1-minute vagal activation twice daily. Stop eating 3 hours before bed. Lift weights at least 3 times per week. Add 1 serving of nitrate-rich greens daily. Track sleep duration and consistency. Do not guess how you feel. Measure it. Track morning energy. Track stress tolerance. Track sleep quality. Track performance. Your body will respond quickly when given the right signals. Remember, the goal is not short-term stimulation. The goal is metabolic resilience, hormonal efficiency, and vascular health that supports you for decades. If this added value to your understanding of how your body truly works, like the video and subscribe to join others optimizing their health naturally. Because when you understand the biology, you regain control. And when you regain control, restoration becomes possible. And if this layered, science-driven approach is helping you rethink your health strategy, consider subscribing. I share tools like this regularly to help you optimize naturally without dependence on medication.